And I want to thank the CFMA for the invitation to join you guys today. It's really exciting. It's the first conference I've been at in over 2.5 years. So it's amazing just to be able to get together and break bread and share some wine and have a great time. So I've been looking forward to it. I founded the Alliance back 26 years ago because I really, truly believe leadership matters, and particularly during times of change. And we certainly live in those times of change. During the last 2.5 years, every CEO I know has had to deal with things that may come up once in their careers or maybe 2 or 3 times at most, but pandemics, supply chain challenges, economic swings, talent wars, and particularly in construction where you're building places to work and live. Basically everybody on the planet has at least rethought how and where we live and work. So it's changing things. And so when Jim Untied, thank you Jim, called me earlier this year and asked me to speak about CEO leadership, I was flattered, but frankly, I'm not the expert on CEO leadership. I am honored and privileged to be able to have worked with over thousands of CEOs, and I learned from each and every single one of them. And although there are some wrong ways to lead, there's no single right way. And so frankly, I suggested, when we brainstormed a little bit of what we might do, I suggested maybe we bring together a panel of some really excellent CEOs, all construction CEOs, that really bring different perspectives, different business models, different leadership philosophies, different situations, and different journeys to the conversation, so we can see kind of a mix of how different leaders lead their companies. And so I reached out to 4 of the most inspiring and very best construction CEOs that I've had the privilege to work with. They all volunteered to join us today. Unfortunately, Merav Oren, the CEO of Versatile, a very well-funded, fast-growing construction technology company, was not able to be here. She had to make a trip back to Tel Aviv to make a few changes. But I've asked them to share their journeys, their leadership philosophies, their lessons learned with us today, and they all volunteered, so thank you very much to our panelists for not leaving me alone up here. So I've enjoyed getting to know all of you. You run companies of very different sizes. They're all significant companies, different market sectors and geographies, different growth strategies, and different financial structures. Everything from privately owned to employee owned to, I don't know, how do you, with your corporate owners, globally owned
Yes.
ownership. So, and I believe each CEO must find the right vision, strategy, values that are right for their own companies and then for themselves. They got to be authentic for themselves. So with that, let's meet them. Jess, please get us started just by sharing kind of your journey and some of the inflection points along the way to all of a sudden being asked to be the CEO of Webcor Builders.
Okay, sure. Well, yeah, appreciate being here today. Have an opportunity to share some of it because we always get good questions that come from that and make you think even deeper and deeper. When I was growing up, my dad was a carpenter. He was an immigrant. And so my summers were spent either stuffing insulation or hanging acoustic ceilings or drywall. And no one had gone to college in either of my families, but I went to junior college and nothing stuck. So I went back in the trades and started going through them. So I'd say my leadership journey was, a couple of years in, you start to understand what's taking place, and then all of a sudden you're leading people. And so I was like, well, that's different than just doing. So I did that for about 4 or 5 years. And then me and my hang glider had a little accident, so I had to stop in the construction business using my body and go back to school. So I went back to college, got a degree in construction management, and came out on the paper side. And started, as most do as a project engineer, working up through, different projects and operations, and then continuing to the management side. and just had always loved, the aspect of being able to demonstrably see the product of what you are involved with, ultimately come to fruition. There's just something so tangible about that I don't know, I enjoyed it as a kid, and I continued to enjoy it throughout my building career. So continued to do that, and then started, same thing, if you are moving from a doer to a manager, well, that's because they've given you someone, and now you have to manage, and now you have to lead and show them where you're going and how you're going to get there. And I would say that's probably the biggest thing about leading is how bright can you paint that North Star? How much can you help them see what the vision is that you have for where you're going? And I don't care if that's just one day as a crew, lead of a crew where you have to say, today, here's what we're going to do. We need to do these things. How are we going to get there? Or if you're running a company and you're saying, hey, in 5 or 10 years, we want to be here. How do you break that down and ultimately do it? So I got lucky enough to continue to work on larger and more complex projects and just continue to enjoy that. And one day I was tapped and they said, well, I think you've got the building side down. Now you need to come into the office and help us chase work. Well, I thought it was really hard to build work, but it's even harder to go get it. And then once you get it, I came to love the interaction of what takes place in that, which is having a chance to influence it. Which is to say, after we win work, and kind of our side of it is that we're come on with the designers, engineers, we spend 6, 12, 18 months figuring out exactly how we're going to build it, get it permitted, and then go and build it. And so if you're there as a team, able to go ahead and have that influence and bring that value to the table, there's a lot of enjoyment in that. And then it was about a dozen years or so ago that I was tapped, and they said, well, it's time for you to take over as CEO. And I thought, well, heck, I know how to get work now, and I know how to build work. How tough could that be? Well, I was pretty damn naive, because there's legal and HR and IT and everything that comes with it. It's everything else but that. And that's when I called Paul and I go, because I can't go inside the company and say, hey, I got a little problem here, it's with our insurance here, and it's about to blow up. What do I do? So you got to find others that you can rely on. And so that's when I found out that there's groups for that. There's CEO groups that you go to, and you kind of spill your guts out and you say, I really got this problem. I don't know what to do. I'm sure some of you have tackled that before. What would you do? And then you get a dozen smart people solving the problem for you in so many different angles, because we all have blind spots. There's things that we can see, that we can do, that we have our own capabilities for, but ultimately there's others out there who've done it in different ways and can help. And so that would be the one thing I would say is never, be too timid to ask for help, because it does exist. And ultimately, Paul's group has helped me understand, some of the challenges I've had and how to take them on. So that's how I got here.
Thank you. Jessica, what's your journey?
I think that our journeys there's some fairly similar points, starting out with the fact that my dad is also a carpenter. He was a superintendent when I was a kid. And my mom is a pharmacist. And on Saturdays, both superintendents and pharmacists have to work. And it's much easier to take your kids to the job site when you're the superintendent and leave them in the trailer with the donuts and the plans than it is to take them to the pharmacy. So I spent a lot of time when I was a kid riding around with my dad and my brother in his truck, and a lot of time at job sites, and a lot of time on Saturdays in trailers. And I think that we can all say that my dad now has reached his goal as a parent, because he can say his daughter is the CEO of a construction company. So, but it's interesting. Unlike Jess, I'm not a builder, and I kind of came up in my leadership journey through all of the other stuff, right? Technically, I am a CPA, inactive, in case anybody from the California Board of Accountancy is here. But I started out my education in finance and accounting, and the way that I became a CPA really is because I went to the University of Michigan undergraduate business school, and I had this major imposter complex that everybody around me understood what was going on in a financial statement, that I just didn't get it, right? I mean, I think it's one thing to look at a financial statement and say like, oh yeah, I can read it, margins are up or down, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's something totally different to understand how the number got to the page and what that's saying about the business. And, I spent a lot of time when I was in school trying to learn. It was important to me to understand how the number got on the page, right? And so fundamentally where that gets you is to the place that when you look at a financial statement, what you're really able to do is ask the questions about what's going on with the business and about every single decision that people made within that business that ended up with a number on the page that way, right? And so while technically I'm a CPA, I really think that I look at the financial statements of a company more to understand the business strategy behind it and less to understand, what's the number telling you on the page. But so graduated from the University of Michigan with a degree in finance and accounting, and I went for a couple of years into strategy and operations management consulting. And I think that's a great training ground to start your career. It teaches you all about analytics and how to ask the right questions, et cetera. But ultimately, I am a doer and an executor to a fault. And being a third-party service provider in that way is just not for me, right? Like, I want to get in there and do it, not tell other people what to do, which in many ways becomes problematic when you're a CEO, by the way, I have to say. Learning, right? One of the many things I've learned along the way. But so left consulting and from there went to, I would say mid-market, privately held manufacturing companies, mostly in the automotive space because I'm originally from the Midwest. And I love to joke out here in California that I think startups love to claim that they've got the corner, or they're the people who invented the concept of, oh, well, you have to do it all, right? Totally not true. If you've ever worked in a mid-market business, one that's quickly growing, you know that you absolutely have to do all the things. And particularly if you're in the finance and accounting or back office space, you absolutely have to learn to do all the things. So in the early years of my career, I did everything from not just the financial analytics, but to being a treasury manager, to being the person who had to run payroll when the human resources person got let go in 2008. And it really set me up in a way that, I could say that by a certain point in my career, I had done everything in the back office enough to be dangerous. And that set me on a path of working with mid-market companies in a variety of, capital structures, from family-owned to publicly traded to now an ESOP, and helping them to build the infrastructure to scale sustainably. And so when I got to Skyline, I joined the company as the controller because there was some debate about the CFO title. I'm sure many of you have been in that position. And ultimately, I became the CFO, and I joined at the point in Skyline where we were really starting to leverage the ESOP structure, the employee ownership structure, to drive growth. And we started our geographic expansion journey in 2019. We expanded into capital construction. We moved into Chicago and opened our office there. And 2020, we moved into San Diego, and we purchased Unimark and ServiceMark Construction in Seattle. And we've expanded throughout the Bay Area. And the interesting thing about my leadership journey is, I think I became the person who, the way that I got tapped, that's just what it is, I became the person who was the right person to lead the organization through the next phase of growth, right? So the person, David Hayes, the CEO, my predecessor before me, he's really kind of a growth-minded and growth-focused CEO. And we got to the point in the company's trajectory where we needed somebody who tempered growth with data, right? Who looked at opportunity in a different way, and who understood the need to build the infrastructure to support the growth. And that is where I had come from. So much like Jess, I would say, I think the biggest thing that I've learned throughout my career is that you can't be afraid to understand your limitations, right? Know the point at which you know enough to be dangerous, and understand your strengths, and then understand that there are other people who are experts that can support you. And so that's kind of how I've built the leadership team at Skyline. We have a team of subject matter experts in all of the back office areas that we're talking about to support the presidents and the construction operations leadership. And that way everybody gets to do what they love, they get to do what they're great at, and you have an entire support network to lean on and ask questions. So
Thank you. And Daren, I've had the privilege of watching you grow DRYCO from a very small company to an amazing company over the last 20 years. Is your father a carpenter?
No, my story's a little different.
Okay.
A little different, yes. No, my dad, so I didn't go to college. Out of high school, my second job was working for my dad in construction. My dad was a typical small general engineering contractor that kind of was up and down, right? He had his ups and he had his downs. And I was complaining one Thanksgiving dinner about my job, which was a swing shift job, and I hated to wait. And so I was complaining. He said, "Why don't you come to work for me? I've got a lot of work, and we're doing really well, and we're traveling up and down from Palo Alto to the Oregon border, working for U-Haul, building all these U-Hauls." And so I said, "Sounds good to me. I want to quit my job anyway." So I went to work for him, and as a laborer, and literally was taught how to shovel, at first, and it was good for a while. And then in the early '80s, when interest rates hit 16%. U-Haul shut that work down, and so we found ourselves back in Redwood City, and competing for driveways. There's in Redwood City on the peninsula, there's all the affluent homes. There's Woodside, Atherton, Portola Valley, big driveways, and we were going for the big driveways because that was what we did. Driveways and tennis courts is what we did. And so again, up and down, and he kind of was hitting the skids there for a while. We weren't getting a lot of work, and things were tough, and he said, "Son, I think what's best," because he owed all of the vendors, he owed, had taxes hadn't been paid, had a lot of problems going on. He said, "What I think you need to do, son, is get your license." I'm 23 at the time, 22. He says, "I think you need to go get your contractor's license, and I'll come work for you, and I'll sell you the equipment, write you a note, whatever, and then I'll teach you the business." And I'm like, "Oh, gee. That sounds like a great idea." Not. But what I realized at the time was he didn't have a lot of options, and I'm looking at my dad and I'm looking at my mom, and it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun, The phone would ring and you didn't know if you'd answer the phone. It depended on your mood. If you were positive that day, you'd say, "That's an estimate. Somebody wants an estimate, so I'm going to answer that phone." If you're having a bad day, you'd go, that's another bill collector or vendor guy, so I'm not going to answer the phone. Let the answering machine pick it up. So it was rough in the beginning. Took me a while to get my contractor's license. School's not my big thing, and so I muscled my way through that. I talked to all the vendors. We owed everybody at the time, and we were on cash basis because we owed, like, the biggest one was our asphalt supplier. We owed them, I think, $50,000, and so I went to all of them. I said, "Hey, I'm gonna get you paid back, and all I'm gonna ask is that you give me credit when I start my business." And they all said, "Oh, absolutely, we'd be happy to." I mean, my biggest credit champion in the world was a gal named Gloria. She's a lawyer for Granite Rock, and she was, when I paid her off, talk about letters of reference. If I needed credit anywhere, she was just my champion, and it was good. So I started off, I like to say I started with less than zero, but I got even, and then I started my business in 1985, and the first year we did $750,000 of business, which was huge, right, for me, and we were profitable. And I was able to, at the end of that year, actually go to the auction and buy some equipment, and everybody got paid, because, for a while there with my dad, we would go months. I'm looking at my wife in the front row. We would go months without getting paid because there was no cash. And at one point I was working 2 jobs to try to offset that, and of course my wife was working. But to be able to pay everybody, and we paid our taxes, right? When I started out, the company was Daren Young Company, and the reason why is because I could cash the checks, right? Because that's how it was done, back in the day. That's the way Dad did it. 3 years later, talking to my attorney, and she says, "I think you should incorporate because you've got some assets here, and you need to protect those assets." And so I'm like, okay. So come up with a corporate name, and the company was named DRYCO, DRY are my initials. And the reason why it's DRYCO is because my dad's company was CLYCO, Claude Leroy Young. So to honor my dad, I named it DRYCO, and he was pretty damn proud, I got to tell you. And to be able to go out there and make money the first year, and you know, we just continued to grow. After a year or so, we brought my wife in because we needed somebody to do the books and watch the money. And so he taught my wife all the accounting stuff. And you know, I just worked, you know, 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, just was happy to have work and to have some success. And for the first 15 years, we grew at a rate of 15% a year, pretty straight growth. I taught a seminar at the Pavement Expo for years called Secrets of a Fast-Growing Contractor, because that was fast-growing back then, you know, from 0 to 20, you know. Woohoo! Big number, right? You billionaire guys. But, you know.
Not all in their accounts.
No, I know. But we, you know, for what we do, we were doing really well, and I was, you know, having fun. I mean, when I got in the business, I just wanted to get out. I'm only going to be here long enough to get out because this is not fun. Well, guess what? You start making money, it gets fun, right? It's pretty fun. You start buying equipment, you know, it's pretty good. And of course, I love the business, and I love mostly the people in the business. But we got to 20, and then for like 12 years, we were stuck in the 20s. We hit the 08 recession where it was down to 18, and I actually lost money for the first time. And so, you know, this CEO groups that I'm in have been absolutely priceless in terms of, you know, learning how to muscle your way through all the stuff that comes at you when you're a business owner and you're growing the business. So, you know, stuck in the 20s for 12 years, and then one year we got to 31, and then, you know, the next year was like 41, and then 51, and 61, 71, 81. Last year was, you know, 92. This year will be 105. So it's just these last, you know, it's the I always this expression. It's the economy, stupid, because in the CEO group, during the .com times, when everybody thought they were so smart and they were, I got to pay everybody stock options or they won't stay. And then when that thing crashed, I came back to that meeting. I said, "See, it's the economy, stupid. We're not that smart. We just ride this wave." And so I've been riding this wave for this last, well, since around 16. 16 was a year where we had plenty of work. We kind of messed it up a little bit because the work got bunched up, and we weren't able to be efficient towards the end of the year. But I fixed that with the help of my CEO group, and it took me about a half year to figure out what even happened. But I've been able to adjust, and as I say, since then we've just been riding this wave right through the pandemic. I mean, the beautiful thing about the pandemic for me was you people stayed home, right? You weren't on the road, you weren't in your parking lot. It was perfect, right? What we do is we do paving, concrete, and fencing, right? And mostly we work for GCs as a sub. A lot of work for you guys, thank you. And then also property managers. And so, right through that pandemic, we just soared. It was great. Labor went down, because we weren't stuck on the highway for 2 hours every day. So it's been good. It's been a good ride. I'm in a different role now than you guys because I hired a president 5 years ago to help me run the company. And, he's the smartest guy I know. And he's doing a great job for me. He's taking a lot of the pressure off. That's why I have raccoon eyes. It's because I don't have to be in there. I'm not flying to Montana this afternoon, So, it's been a good ride, and I enjoy what I do. And as I said, the CEO groups, those peer groups, and I'm in a bunch of different peer groups, and they're very helpful for what we do.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thanks everybody for sharing the journeys. I think I hope you all found how different these journeys are, and different the companies are, different the leaders are, experience-wise. We're going to now turn it into more of a conversation, hopefully. Please feel free to ask questions. If I don't see you, shout out or something else. But we're going to open it up a little bit, and feel free to ask each other. But next question. So what are they? We're talking about CEO leadership, principles, philosophy, so forth. So what are the most valuable things you've learned along the way? How did you learn them? And how do you apply them these days? So Jessica, I'm going to start with you. And you actually had of all three, for certainly, but you had a very designed succession planning process.
Sure.
You know, to the extent to really learn before you actually officially took over the seat. So, but what were the key learning?
Well, you know, it's funny. I was thinking about this question. Early in my career, you know, one of the things I didn't go into a lot of detail on is I was very lucky in that I got presented with a lot of really interesting opportunities, right? People would, you know, I had leaders and mentors who came to me and said, hey, we'd like you to do this, we'd like you to do this, then, you know, and every time I was afraid to do those things, right? I can tell you the scariest thing I ever did, well, two scary things. One scary thing I did was I was a plant controller for a while. Oh my God, that is terrifying, okay? I didn't know anything about being a plant controller when I was made a plant controller, but I figured, I fundamentally kind of came to this belief that if I worked hard enough, I would figure it out. I could figure out anything. I mean, and if I put in enough hours in a day and et cetera, ultimately I'd be able to make it work. There was nothing I couldn't figure out if I worked hard enough. And that worked early in my career. But as I alluded to, as you get higher up in your career and you manage more people and you rely more heavily on teams, that's just not true, right? When you're the CEO, sometimes it doesn't matter how many hours you put in because you're not the one doing the work, right? So ultimately it's about learning to trust and rely on the people around you and delegate effectively instead of saying, hey, I'm gonna take it all on myself. And that has been, for me, I think one of the most interesting and difficult lessons of leadership is learning to accept that ultimately it doesn't matter. I can't control it all. Me putting in more hours isn't going to change the outcome, right? So that's one of the interesting things. The other thing that I think has been kind of the foundation value that I've carried through my career, and ultimately I think is what got me in the seat I'm in today, is I learned very early on the hard way, you just have to do the hard thing. I mean, you know, as a business leader, you know when you're faced with it, it's usually staring you right in the face. In your gut, you know what the hard thing is, but it's not easy to do it, right? I'm sure everybody up here could come up with just all the scenarios running through your head where there was a hard thing staring them down. It was really hard to do it, and then once you did it, the sense of relief and moving forward is overwhelming. Or when you dragged your feet and you didn't do it, and then like a year you're like, I knew I should have taken care of that, and here we are again, right?
What was the first big one, hard one that you took on?
The first hard one. Yeah, you know, I have been faced, and this is an interesting thing about this industry, I have been faced in a couple of different circumstances with decisions related to, let's call it managing profitability and managing your contracts and doing the right thing, right, and making the hard decision. And I think early on in my career, understanding those things, I mean, and that ranges from like the basics, like project accounting, setting up your contracts, et cetera. I always felt very strongly that, you know, you have nothing but your integrity, and that's how you have to approach those situations. And I think early on in my career, working with project management teams and making sure that everybody was always doing the right thing, even if it wasn't necessarily the best thing for profitability. I think that's really was kind of the inflection point in my career where people recognized, like, you know, this is the backbone that it takes to really be a leader.
Okay. Jess, you had a different situation when you took over as CEO. You didn't have a whole lot of time to think about it, if I remember correctly.
No, if you were talking about one of those tough decisions.
You never do have time, unfortunately.
Well, we were, so I was going to say, one of the things I learned is there's fire prevention and there's firefighting. In the beginning, when you take over, you're just fighting fires. You're thinking, oh, that's what I need to do because there's all these fires that got to be put out. And then you realize that you really can plan and you can prevent the fires. And you're like, oh man, okay, well I got to get into fire prevention. I'm tired of firefighting. And one of the fires was the COO that we had and our CFO. And the group helped me realize, I didn't know what happened, but that they've been around forever, like 35, 40 years. And I teed up my problem to the group and they go, yeah, here's your problem. They've got a founder syndrome. They were here when the company was founded. They can see as far as they thought they could see at the beginning. They can't see much farther. And you're already taking it farther. You want to go farther, you got to find someone else. I'm like, really? They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. Well, we're owned by a Japanese company. Okay, you don't let anyone go in a Japanese company, much less people at the top. So that was not an easy hill to take. And then it was unanimous. There was like 10 of them. It's like, you got to do it. I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And then that was it. And you're right. Once you got through it and you did it and you moved on, it was like that sense of relief for it. So yeah, preventing those fires. And I would say the other one I brought up, I already talked about, which was vision. You're asking about some of those qualities. Because the brighter you can paint that North Star, you think strategy matters, but culture matters more. And the brighter you can paint that North Star, the less you have to tell people what to do. Because they'll start doing something and then they'll look up and they'll go, there's no North Star over there. Oh, it's over there. I better go that way. So whatever that vision is that you come up with, whatever those strategic plans, whatever it is, paint it as bright as you can. And if you think you've said it once and if you haven't said it 10 or 20 times, and you just stay at 30 or 40. Because people still come up and they go, so what is our purpose? I'm like, oh my God, I got it plastered everywhere. So yeah, vision's a big deal. But then I would also say that degree in construction was good for a few years, but I really needed a doctorate in psychology. Because in the end, it's people. It just comes down to people and how do you find people and whether they're motivated and how do you get them to work together and how do you keep them working together and how do you continue all that stuff? And that's a very large part of it. But I also say eventually you got to find out what's authentically and genuinely you and what's your style and how are you going to lead. Like Paul said, there's no right way, but you got to figure out using your strengths, how do you get there? And yeah, there's some wrong ways and people will tell you, but how do you authentically do that in a way that people will want to follow? Because they'll know that it's not fake. They'll know that you're not just, it's not a veneer that we're going to go this way and it's all going to be okay. It's like, really? Well, let's talk about that. You know, you got to show it warts and all what's taking place and here's what I know and here's what I don't. And I think that's when people will really build up the maximum trust in you. And in fact, trust is one of the bedrock foundation things you need in order if you're really going to lead.
You know, I'd like to ask you a question I don't think I've ever asked you, but and I think you took over about 10 years ago, tapped to be CEO. And had you given it much thought prior to that time, being tapped, about what would I do if I was a CEO? You're a top senior executive. But the CEO role is a little bit different. Had you actually thought about it prior to being tapped? And because it was a tough time when you took over.
Yeah, our previous CEO was a little more autocratic, kind of, general. You're just going to tell everyone what to do, and I'm 180 to that. And so there wasn't much of a succession plan. In fact, there wasn't really any, except that someday you'll keep moving up and something will happen. So I didn't really have a sense of how it came together. Had always dealt, seen parts and pieces, but not the whole enchilada.
But did you have any aspirations, or is it just, or not?
Yeah, I think everybody would, enjoy continuing in their career, but I would never think I'm going to be a CEO. It's like a CEO. Oh my God, I didn't know anyone who was a CEO. I didn't know what it meant to be a CEO. I just wanted to get to the next level, and then you get to that level, and you're like, whoa, it's different.
Well, frankly, talking to a lot of the C-level executives, most of them are smart enough not to want to be the CEO because all of a sudden they realize they have no longer any air cover. It's a whole different role. So anyway, Daren, what's your primary lessons learned along the way?
Oh gosh.
How'd you?
I learned early on that if you just return phone calls, you can actually be successful. That was a mind blower. I am a master delegator, and so I always say I was fortunate because I was never really good at anything, And so I could always find somebody that could do it better, whether it was raking or operating or anything, you know, dispatching. I was an okay estimator, but I've got guys working for me now that just would run circles around me. So that's been the thing that has been most helpful in building the business, is being willing to delegate and give them full responsibility. And you know, I'm not looking over anybody's shoulder. It's worked beautifully for me. And the other thing that I found out along the journey was the thing that makes me tick is watching other people succeed. It's like, it's such a great feeling to, you know, I have this story where we were at our office in Fremont, and I was probably in the teens at that time, in terms of sales, and I walked out of the office to go to lunch in the parking lot, and there's a brand new Ford Ranger parked in the parking lot. And I'm like, whose Ford Ranger is that? It's a brand new, I didn't own a brand new car at that time. I mean, whose is it? And they go, oh, that's Yaye's Ford Ranger. He lives in Modesto and he commutes, so he bought that car. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I got an employee that has a brand new car, and I gave him this opportunity. So that was like, and then, you know, went on from there, you know. First employee bought a house, and it's what drives me is I have this saying that I learned from Zig Ziglar, you know, back in the day. Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and all the self-help books you could possibly read. I had to read them all because I didn't know nothing. And Zig Ziglar, I was in a seminar, and he's up on the stage, bigger than life. He says, you know, you can get everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. And I'm like, wow, I totally got that, right? I totally got that. And so I actually have a poster on my wall in my office that says that. And so we have a thing called the ladder. You know, it's like, hey, when you come to DRYCO, like I did, you could start on the end of a shovel, but you're not going to stay there. You're going to work your way up. You're going to go from the shovel, maybe you're going to be an operator, maybe you're going to be a junior foreman, a superintendent. I've got guys, the weekend before Halloween, we had a big party, 650 employees at our yard, and big thing. And I had give these awards out for tenure. I had 3 guys, 30-year employees, 30 years. And total examples of the ladder. You know, they started because we were all laborers back then. And now they're, you know, superintendents, division managers, whatever it is. So the thing that I've learned the most in being in business is that, you know, if you help others, you're going to be fine. And, you know, I just kind of turn everything upside down, whether it be the management, you know, the pyramid or whatever. You know, it's like, I just don't think like other business people, I guess, at the end of the day. I do it different, but it works for me. And it works for the employees, so that's the main thing.
So you led probably the most conscious and patient cultural initiative that I believe I've seen. I've seen a lot of them and such, but you had the patience. You didn't just do it as a Band-Aid or something else. You actually consciously did it. Tell us a little bit about, you know, how you and I'm trying to remember when that was, but I think it was around the time when you had the inflection point in your growth.
About 10 years ago, I would say. So I hired a consultant that specialized in culture, building culture, and I didn't know what I was getting into, but it was a 2-year process. The first year, we came up with the acronym that would be our values, and we did it with the office. And so it was, you know, like I said, it took a full year to flush out, you know, and it wasn't me. These weren't my values. These were the company's values, and that's what made it work. You know, it's not like Daren telling you, well, these are what we're going to focus on. And so they came out: teamwork, open communication, fun, which I thought was weird, but it was there, integrity, and trust. And so it's TUFIT. The acronym is TUFIT. And so it worked beautifully, and it really was who we were. The fun part was kind of, I was taken back by that, but you know, this party that we had a couple weeks ago is a prime example. 650 employees, and we just had a blowout party. And we have a lot of stuff that we do that's fun. A lot of it, we call it employee appreciation. We appreciate the field guys a lot and let them know that they're appreciated. Then we had to roll this two-fit culture into the field. Well, that took another year. And the way we did that was we created these teams, and every team had a color, and they were across all the divisions. So you could have a striper guy, a seal coat guy, a paving guy, a concrete guy, a fence guy, you know, different field guys from, you know, so they couldn't be a clique, right? And we built these teams, and what they were charged to do was build a carnival game that fits the value. So build us a game that demonstrates teamwork. You know, build us a game that you have to use communication. Build us a game that's fun. That's easy. Build us a game that, you know, demonstrates integrity, and the last one was trust. So, you know, it took us a long time, and some of these games were great, and some of them were terrible, depending on the team. You know, level of participation. Some guys really got into it, and other guys were like, "Can we go to work now?" So anyway, this thing, when all the games were done and the two-fit culture was all built and everybody got it, we had a carnival. We had a big party at Lake Elizabeth where we brought all the carnival games out. We set them all up, and all the families, kids, came out and played with all the games, and it was great. I mean, there's the fun in two-fit, right? And it was really good. And now the thing is, you know, we have it on the wall, the two-fit, you know, on the wall, definition of it. But literally twice a month, I'm in once a month in Fremont, once a month in Sacramento. I hold a safety meeting, takes about an hour, and I don't miss a meeting where I don't remind them what our culture is and what it's done for us, because it has totally separated us from our competition in that, as everybody's been suffering with staffing issues, DRYCO hasn't suffered with staffing issues at all, because the word's out that DRYCO's a great place to work. You know, guys that do what we do, shovel asphalt and trowel cement, you know, you come to our facility, it doesn't look like, you know, a contractor's yard. It's kind of Class A office space with a big yard with a lot of pretty trucks and yellow iron and stuff. So I just keep telling them, guys, we're different. We're not like everybody else, and that's what we have to. And we're growing like a weed, so we're adding new people all the time. And you know, you got to help these guys up the ladder. You know, somebody helped you. You didn't start where you are now. So make sure you keep that in mind and help these guys to come up, because we need these guys to grow. And as I say, we're growing really well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jessica, so what have you evolved your key leadership philosophies, and also from a cultural standpoint, you have a ESOP, an employee-owned company.
Yep.
How different is that leading an employee-owned company? Not that you've led another one that's not, but what's the differences there, and what are your key?
You know, I don't know. Listening to, you know, just like Jess and Daren, I've been a part of CEO groups, and I've listened to a lot of CEOs talk, and I don't know that it's so different, really, right? I think inherently you would assume it is, because you're working for an employee-owned company. I guess the great thing I'll say every day is that, you know, I know that I'm working for the employees of the organization. It's inherently very, very rewarding to be able to say that everything you're doing is driving the, you know, future meaningful retirement benefits for our employees, right? Ultimately, that's what I strive to do, and that's my vision for the organization, is that we will continue to provide meaningful, sustainable retirement benefits, you know, at the end of the day. But I think all CEOs, when it comes down to it, for the most part, really feel like they serve the people of their organization. I mean, I think if you listen to these two up here, they would say the same thing, right? Fundamentally, I consider myself a servant leader. I feel very lucky to be in the position that I'm in, to be able to work for the employees of the Skyline stock plan. And yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I don't think that's so different from most CEOs, though. I think everybody believes that.
And do you have a nice acronym for your cultural values, or what
you know,
how would you define them?
You know, our cultural values are defined. They're integrity. We build better together. We're in an interesting spot, though, and this might be a good place to share a lesson learned, right? We have grown a lot through geographic expansion, both organically and inorganically, and that means that you're going out and buying other companies, right? And so but part of the reason that you're buying another company is because inherently they have a strong culture that fits with yours, right? And you're buying a brand that exists and is strong in the market, and their own culture and values are part of that, right? And so I get asked a lot, well, are you going to consolidate all of our values into yours, right? Or is everybody's values going to become Skyline's? And that's a very painful thing for many of these organizations to consider. And so no, I'm not going to do that. I don't think that there's a lot of value in fundamentally pushing the same, call it 5 words on everybody across all of the organizations. But what I will tell you is that I believe that, whatever you call it, fundamentally, all of the people who are members of the Skyline family of companies believe the same thing, right? And so I don't get very hung up on the one label, right? But we're a people-first culture. We believe in integrity. We believe in continuous improvement. We believe in building a better environment, making everything around us and everything we do better, right? There's all these different ways that the various companies have put that language together, but fundamentally, it's all the same thing.
Cool. Jess?
Wait, I have a question. Is it an advantage for you to be employee-owned? So these companies you're purchasing, they're not ESOPs.
Right.
So is that an advantage to you to be able to say, you're going to be an owner?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
go
yeah,
ahead.
you do fundamentally get a different level of investment in the organization, right? And you get a different level of investment by the leadership team. There's also an interesting thing that happens wherein, many of the organizations in our industry are privately held, right? And inherent in that, sorry to say this, is a conflict, right, between the owner or the small ownership group and the employees, right? Because fundamentally, every dollar gets split between those two people, right? And that ownership structure. And that's not true in an ESOP, right? Every dollar gets plowed back into the organization for the employees. So that inherent conflict doesn't exist. There's no misalignment between the incentives for the management team and the governance team and the owner, right? Everybody is fundamentally working for the same thing. Now, that is not to say that an ESOP is a panacea and the end all be all. And I have to say that because it does get discussed a lot in our industry. Particularly now, I think there's a large number of people who started organizations, right, who are potentially looking for, well, what's the next step in my ownership structure, and maybe considering giving it to the employees and forming an ESOP. It's great. You have to go in eyes wide open. So if anybody wants to talk about ESOPs, my contact information will be out there. I'm happy to do it. It's wonderful, but you really need to understand what you're getting into in order to be successful.
Thank you. Jess?
Yeah, I guess it's a good point around, the things that you can rally around a company and the things that you believe. And I think probably the first question is, why? Why do you exist? Why would people come work for you? What is it about you? And so that's defining your purpose. What is your purpose? For us, it's about building solutions that better lives. And that can be taken in a lot of ways. I mean, when Daren says, hey, it's your responsibility to help someone else up the ladder, that's the same thing. It's like, how are you helping better other people that are within your community and outside of your community? And then, of course, they've been talking a lot about values. And that's, again, how do you want to work? How are we going to interrelate with each other? And what's important enough for us to go ahead and talk through? And so then you got mission and you got vision, where you're going. And so I think the big thing, though, is to find out what really drives you as a company. Is it your purpose? Is it where you're going? Is it what you're doing now and what's about your mission? Is it about how you do it and your values? And that helps you really understand what helps you differentiate yourself from others, because there's some unique twist to the way that you do it in your companies versus the way that someone else does. So capitalize on that. Get in there and spend the time that Daren has, like years, trying to really ferret that out and understand what that common bond is and pull it together and get everyone to know it and everyone to feel it. And then you're a real team. And that's a really big deal.
All right. Well, first of all, if anybody has any questions, let me know. Raise your hand. But I'd like to move more towards the future, particularly in the last 2.5 years when we're dealing with so much stress on the operations, the organizations, our customers, sometimes even the bank accounts. It's necessary to focus on day-to-day and making cash flows and everything else. But at the same time, great CEOs never lose sight of the long-term vision. So, would you like to start? Tell us what you're building for the future, whether it's from a market standpoint, from a size standpoint, from just a cultural standpoint, whether it's a succession planning, what do you guys envision for the future of your organizations? Anybody? Before I call it.
Yeah, it's inevitable. I am building a legacy business. So my goal is to have this business go on for multiple generations, and that's not an easy thing to do.
Do you want to talk about ESOPs?
Huh? What did you say?
I said, do you want to talk about ESOPs?
No. Well, my wife actually brought that up the other day after we had a family meeting. What I want to do is I want to build, and it's just consistent with my values, which is I just want to create more opportunity for more people. And recently we bought a company in Sacramento so we could be a stronger presence in Sacramento, and integrating their culture into all our culture. It didn't work. It just didn't work. They were just so different. They had this scarcity mentality, and they were driven hard and hung up wet, and we're like, no, we're going to be nice to you. We're going to all have fun. They're looking at me like, you're crazy, because they've been in construction a long time. You're not that guy. And so eventually they all left. And but it's just the work is moving out there for us, what we do, and I just tell them, this is the opportunity in Central Valley, and most of my guys live in Central Valley. I mean, 95% of the field guys are Mexican guys. The office is about 25%, and most of those are second generation. They're employees, kids that have come to work for DRYCO, and that makes me happy. That makes me really happy. And so creating opportunity for the next generation, and the generation after that, and the generation after that, is really, really important to me. It's what's currently driving me.
Okay. Jess, you want to tell us what you envision for the future of Webcor and yourself?
Sure. So Webcor is owned by Obayashi. They're like, I don't know, the 12th or 13th largest contractor in the world. The depth of capital it gives us allows us to do a lot of unique things, really big jobs, really complex things, and things in the industry. But you're also working for the Japanese, and they have like a 25-year plan. And they're like, what's your 25-year plan? And like, I'm going to make up shit because I have no idea, But I'll give you a plan, okay? So it's like, you can see 2 or 3, and then 4 or 5, you start to stretch it. But ultimately, strategically, you have to try and say, okay, in 10 or 15 years, where are we going? Because you want to try and push yourself outside of the bounds and restrictions of today. I'm 64, I'm retiring next year. So a lot has been around succession planning the last 2 or 3 years. And a lot of chess pieces, getting the right people in place, and really thinking about how that comes about, because someone's watched me, and it's a 50-year company, and this will be the 4th generation that takes it and moves on. Not a family company, but a 4th generation of leadership who are some really smart people, and just having moved them in places, they're already fixing shit that I couldn't fix. And I'm like, dang, good, let's do this, And so it's really interesting to see what that is. And so we just had our executive retreat a few weeks ago, and it's really hard not to want to, input, because we're redoing our strategic plan for 5 years and trying to set the business plan for next year. And I'm really more of a mentor, and I'm someone there to kind of poke and prod a little bit and make sure they're asking the right questions. But how do you stimulate those conversations and keep them going internally so people will carry that on? And yes, very often that purpose around what we are as a company is continuing, around how we really do that in the right way. A lot of around what Daren talks about, and even Jessica, with the right way to treat people and collaborate and build upon the kind of things that allow, working together with people to just get better and better over time. And so, long term, there's some initiatives that we have. I think probably our biggest one is around information flow. I mean, because there's one thing that everybody in this room wants, regardless of where you are in the food chain, and that's answers. All we want is decisions and answers, and then you can get the information, then you can make things go. And that's true of, the designers, the engineers, the subcontractors, contractors, the city, just everybody wants that. So how do you really do that in an organized way? And so one of the things we've concentrated on is because it's easy for contractors to go to engineers and designers and go, well, why don't you just give me that? Well, when you peel back the onion, they don't give you that because they don't have the answers from their owners. And they got to get an answer from the owner for them to be able to advance it. And so they hold off in parts and pieces. So ultimately, it's about coming up with a decision matrix around the decisions you need in the entire project lifecycle. What do you need and when do you need them? Because the client's not going to give you them all at once, and you can't deal with them all at once. So how do you lay those decision inflection points around what you need, how you get it, how you can find ways to be organized about it? Because telling a subcontractor, okay, we just got this job, and in somewhere around 12, 18 months, we're going to get started, and then it's going to take another 2 years to get done, and how much does it cost? That's not a lot of certainty, and that's one of the things that continues to drive a lot of costs in our industry is that lack of certainty. And so how do we really drive that out of it and give people a whole lot more certainty along the process, along the way, and really find ways to team up with those that we work and really be our true partners.
And Jessica, ever since I've met you over 3 years ago, you've been incredibly busy.
Yeah.
Not only running the company, but I'm not sure quite how many acquisitions of really strategic nature you've made, and also have 2 additions to your young family.
Sure.
But tell us more about where you're headed. You're growing your company in a different way.
Sure.
Where are you headed?
Yeah, our vision is to be the household name for commercial interior construction in the U.S. And so we just closed an acquisition in San Diego, actually. But ultimately, our goal in doing that is to, one, create opportunity for our people. We believe that a national presence will allow us to partner with our customers in all of the places that they build, and will give opportunity for our people to move and also to generate meaningful employee retirement benefits for our team. So just inherent in the nature of being an ESOP, we are always driving to that point of creating a meaningful retirement benefit for our employees. But that's our vision, and I think in achieving it, we can create a lot of opportunity for our people too. I think very similar to what Daren said, one of the things that drives me is just the opportunity that we have to create opportunities for the next generation of leaders and for all of the great talent that we have within the organization.
Well, and one of the characteristics I've seen with great CEOs and great leaders are they actually walk the talk. And you personally, since you're promoting a national organization, has mobility between the different organizations, not just a portfolio of acquired companies, but companies that work together.
Yeah. Oh, I started to talk about this, so this is interesting. One of the things I think that that we do really well at Skyline is we acknowledge mistakes and we learn from them and we make changes. And I think that's important. It's important at a leadership level to be able to demonstrate that quality and walk the talk on that front. But it's interesting, when we started our geographic expansion, we considered this trade-off between a really strong local brand, right? Because in what we do, it's very important to be able to say, hey, we have the team that has the relationships with the subcontractors that can get them there when they're busy, that has the relationships with the building owners and the permitting relationships, the things that you need to get your project done in a timely fashion, right? And that is about a really strong local team that can execute flawlessly and give you this bespoke delivery experience. But at the same time, as you get into larger and larger projects and more sophisticated clients that have, locations across the country, they are also looking for the balance sheet strength of a strong national brand, right? A bigger organization in that capital backing, kind of like Jess referenced. And so we had to make a decision early on about what's going to be the more important strategic play. Is it the strong local brand or is it the big national presence? We guessed wrong. We thought strong local brands, and we created our greenfield opportunities and let some of our acquisitions linger under their existing brands for a while. And ultimately what we realized is that the customers can figure out very quickly if you have a strong local team, right? They'll know if they have the relationships, they'll be able to tell that. But what they can't figure out, no matter how many times you say it, or even if it's like on the little logo, a Skyline company, they don't know that it's Skyline. They can't figure that out. And so ultimately, we actually today are launching the rebrand of a couple of our companies. Our company in Chicago, currently named Ascend, into Skyline, and Unimark in Seattle to Skyline Construction as well. All of this to say, we need to do that also to be able to truly facilitate acting as one company internally, right? And all of the strategic things that have to happen along with servicing customers at a national level. The ability to share resources nationally, the ability to have leadership in different places. So yes, to where Paul was going is to walk the talk. If all of your leadership sits in the Bay Area, you become a very Bay-centric company. It's just hard, right? You're inclined to hire people in the Bay Area. But so my husband and I recently relocated with our family, and I have 2 kids, 4 and 2. We just relocated to Seattle in the middle of September because we believe that at Skyline, that's one of our big upcoming geographic locations, and we wanted to get some additional leadership presence there. All of that to say, I now have demonstrated to employees that even the CEO can go from one location to another and still be part of the organization. And so that whole idea of walking the talking, being able to show people that you have the opportunity to move geographies, stay with the organization, I think it's really important. This is an interesting, there's been an interesting trade-off, I think, in construction about the whole idea of returning to the office. So as we considered the pandemic, we brought most of our construction operations teams back to the office fairly quickly because it was difficult to say to the superintendents and the laborers and the teams in the field, hey, every day you have to go to work, particularly when it was perceived to be very dangerous. You have to get up and go to the job site, and everybody else is going to stay at home and be safe. I didn't have the stomach for that. And so we were very thoughtful. We were very lucky to have a lot of great resources from a legal and safety perspective to be able to facilitate returning to work. So our project teams supporting the office or the field returned to the office very early. The back office staff at the same time had, in many ways, largely outgrown the office space and were supporting locations everywhere anyways, right? So most of my head of legal was in Chicago. He was in San Diego. He was in Seattle. He was in the Bay Area. We were looking at acquisitions, talking to business owners, right? So those people were already mobile. They were kind of living that life anyways. And it didn't make sense to have an office that sat empty for a long time. So a lot of that leadership had already moved into a more remote kind of mobile environment. So it was not difficult for me then to move and do the same thing. It's really funny when I moved into the Seattle office, everybody kind of looked at me and they were like scared, and they thought I was going to be super scary. And they're like, "What? So what do you do?" And I'm like, "You know what? I spend a lot of time on the phone. Like, I'm really sorry. I'm going to come in here every day. I'm going to close my door and I'm going to spend the whole day on the phone because my teams are everywhere. My leadership's in the Bay Area. It's in San Diego, right?" And it's true. So I'm either on the phone or I'm on a plane because, or for the couple hours that I'm meeting with the team in Seattle, right? But we really have become a multi-location organization. I spent a lot of time traveling, a lot of time talking to people in other places. But I think it's exemplary of kind of where we're going societally, right? The pandemic has really changed the kind of dialogue around, frankly, the need for physical presence in business overall, right? And I think it will be interesting, to Paul's point, where we go in the next couple of years. Anybody who works in the commercial office space is disingenuous to tell you that it hasn't been a rough couple of years. First, the questions raised around fundamentally, do you need to do business in person and what does that look like? And now with the interest rate environment and, kind of its impact on funding and lending for capital investment projects, it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out all over time. And I think we are really, as a society, going to start asking questions about, like I said, what do I need to do? What are the benefits that I get from business interactions face to face? And I don't know that we all know the answer to that yet. I think we're still asking the questions, but it will be interesting to see how it plays out over the next couple of years, and then ultimately how it may or may not be impacted by a recession as well.
I'm curious, how long have you been in the Seattle office?
Since the middle of September.
So just a couple months. So I think just the fact that you went up there, moved up there, have an office up there, speaks volumes. I'm just curious, any observations on, now that you've been there a couple months, you're traveling, that type of thing, but do you think how much difference do you think it makes as far as just your being there when you're there, even though you're behind closed doors making?
I'm a huge believer in physical presence. I mean, I fundamentally think that, I think back to my early career, and I think about everything I learned from being able to just listen and absorb from all the people around me, walk down the hall, have a cup of coffee, have that ad hoc conversation. I really feel for people who are starting out their career right now in a remote environment and how difficult that is going to be. And I don't know that we know how that's going to play out yet. But even if, I do spend a lot of time jokingly spend a lot of time in my office, but it's so important to be able to connect with employees just literally at the water cooler, at the coffee stand, right? The things that you hear, I think, as a leader that people are willing to share with you in those small moments are so important. They give you so much insight into the health of the business that you don't get strictly by talking to the leadership team, right? So by sitting down and eating lunch at the central table in the cafeteria, that's where I learned the most about what's going on with the health of the business and what people are worried about. So it will be very interesting, I think, to see how this plays out over time if ultimately we believe that not having those things is creating a sustainable business environment.
As an observer of leaders, I actually think that physical presence is that opportunity where Jess mentioned, mentioning or speaking, communicating the purpose, the vision, that little opportunity 10 times, 20 times, 50 times, 100 times or so. You don't have that opportunity virtually very often as much as the serendipity.
Yeah, I was just going to say it is that too, Paul. But think about exactly what Jessica said and how we learned. Someone was over our shoulder, or you were sitting in the desk over there, and I could just ask you a question. And so I think that yes, it's easier to work remote, and you can just put your head down and it's quiet and you can get stuff done. But I think a few years will go by and people realize that those that were in the office, who were getting a little more mentored, who were bumping up against other people and learned more, will probably start moving up the ladder because they will have had more opportunities to go ahead and have those interactions versus just grinding and doing. There's not much fun in grinding and doing the same thing over and over and over for very long. Eventually you want to do something else, but you got to learn from someone else. So how do you do that? That's tough to do virtually.
So we have a weekly leadership team meeting for an hour where everybody gets together and we talk about what's going on in the business, whatever the strategic imperatives are that week. We also do physically present meetings of our regional presidents every 6 to 8 weeks. And then we have a big leadership collaboration where everybody comes together twice a year in May and December to talk about those things. But, you do also have to be very thoughtful about letting people know where you'll be when, so that you can also make time for those in-person interactions.
Again, we go back to our culture. We're looking for somebody that fits our organization. I have hired so many of the wrong controllers, CFOs. I have screwed that up so many times.
What's your ratio?
That's why I asked you.
I am 2 for 5.
I'm about 50-50.
Yeah. It's bad. So now we kind of, the HR has figured out that, when we interview, no matter who you are, whether you're in the field or whether you're, coming in as the next controller, we want to know you fit our culture. And so that's really the primary thing. Obviously, you have to know your stuff, but you don't know how much they know for 3-6 months anyway, right? I mean, you don't know. You think, hey, this looks really good, but then they come in and they really don't know. And I've hired those guys before, and then I make my wife come back and save me until I find the next one.
4 times.
4 times. All right, so my ratio's not as good as I thought.
Maybe you've had the right hire all along, just saying.
Well, I just think maybe to add on to that, I mean, Jessica brought it up to a good degree, which is how do you go ahead and not just make sense of the numbers, but make sense of what they're doing to influence the organization, and then what would you do to make those changes to ultimately drive it where you want it to go. And for us, we ended up having a really smart senior project manager who really loved numbers enough to go work in accounting. And so we brought kind of an operations perspective to the accounting group, and then everybody kind of started to get it, and that really has helped kind of supercharge to have people trust more that accounting gets it, what it means to help operations. And now people, I mean, it used to be, well, they'd call an executive, it's like, I want to go talk to accounting. It's like, just go talk to accounting. It's like, well, but how do I talk accounting? It's like, just go talk to them. Okay, and so it's created a much greater trust between the field and everyone else in finance at all different levels. And I think that's one of the things that can really help to drive things is what do you do to create to develop even more trust amongst the groups throughout the entire company, to where that the insights that you get out of them aren't just numbers, but they're about kind of what's really transpiring.
And as an observer, I'll make a comment, an observer of COs in every industry, I think almost every CO struggles to find that CFO that can be truly proactive strategically, rather than just a great controller, great accountant, great knowing the numbers, but actually be a partner in driving the organization, looking for opportunities, looking for threats, really thinking as a CEO and a visionary for the company is really, really valuable. And it's more of a mindset than it is just competency.
I probably benefited the most because I literally had to learn how to read a P&L, how to read a balance sheet, how to understand. I started off on the end of a shovel, so I had to learn it all. And in these groups, there are people that excel at certain parts. There's some that excel at all the parts, but I've always been able to pull whoever I needed aside, and whatever it is that I was struggling with in 2016 when we kind of bit the dust. I worked with a CEO, Alan Hutman, smartest businessman I know to this day, and he helped me figure it out. It's the 5 key ratios, and he's just like, and I'm just like, swimming in the thing.
You guys met right up here in Napa.
Yeah, we did. And so it's just invaluable. It's just absolutely invaluable. There's no way I'd be where I am today without these peers that are so willing to help, And if they see you struggling and you're trying, it's like how life is. If, I don't want to help somebody that doesn't want to help themselves, but if you're trying, I'll bend over backwards to help you. Whatever I know, whatever that is. So it's been great.
I was going to say part of it's role model, because you only know what you know about the position, and then you see a dozen other people do it in such different ways, and frankly, so much smarter than the way I would have thought about doing it. And I'm like, I could be that smart, can't I? And then you start listening, and then after a few years, new people come into the group, and you're like, yep, here's this problem. It's like, here's how we're going to tackle it. And it gets kind of fun, and you start to learn more and more of these patterns and just issues that flow through all organizations, because that is the one thing, because it's not all construction groups. I mean, I would say there's maybe 2 construction people in our dozen that we have, and so they give you really interesting perspectives, and they bring a whole lot more to the table to help you understand how much better you can be.
Ditto to what both of them have said. I'm always continually surprised in these groups by how smart all of the other people in the group are and how different their approach to a problem would be than mine. So I love coming to them to understand and just look at the different ways that people think and reconsider the way that I might approach a problem that's outside of kind of my natural, like, here's how we're going to do it. That CEOs are so smart and they're so different, and they all have such a different lens with which they approach tackling a problem. I love having insight into that.
And I will thank you for the question, and I did not set that question up, but I will just make one observation. Is is that one of my core philosophies in founding the Alliance is really the power of diversity. I've always wanted to surround myself with people a lot smarter than me and who think differently. And I don't think I've ever had a truly creative idea in my life I didn't borrow or steal from somebody else.
That's for sure.
And so frankly, by design, we try to not just put construction companies together, but with folks doing gene editing and robotics and automation and every type of company there is, because I do believe innovation comes from outside. When we come to a conference and see how somebody else is doing something differently, and whether it's technology being applied to a construction company or different ways of structuring. What about an ESOP or employee owned, and how does that differentiate a company? And there's no one right way of doing things. And sometimes you even if you don't agree with what somebody else is doing, it sharpens your thinking about why you do things the way we do it. So with that, let's go more to this coming future. What's things continue to change, and actually, I was reflecting as you were talking about return to work, that type of thing. Back in May of 2020, we were naive enough to believe actually we'd be returning to workplaces very quickly. That this is going to wave is going to come over us, and we'll be right back to work, and no problem. And I realized that actually watching all these CEOs in March send 100% of their people basically home to work and start working remotely, and it was actually digital, like turning a light on or off. Nope, you're going to not come to the office, you're going to go work from home. That was actually simpler than thinking how we return to the office, because not everybody, some of them like doing it, and the kids were in school and all sorts of different complications. And so we put together a forum on return to workplace strategies. And one of your executives at Webcor was on the panel because, frankly, you were an essential business, and you guys continue to work and such. So you guys had more experience, along with a few others, of actually returning people to work and how you do it for safety and culture, and productivity, and all those kind of things. But now that we're hopefully towards the back end of COVID, and hopefully the next pandemic waits a little while. What are you guys thinking about for the coming year, 2 years, 3 years? Not 25, okay? But what kind of challenges are you thinking CEOs, particularly construction companies, need to address in the coming year, particularly as we start coming back to work more often? The economy, all sorts of different challenges. And Jessica, I'll start with you, because you actually, since you do interiors, all your customers are thinking about how do we bring them back more efficiently, more effectively? Do we bring them back more hybrid models of all different types? So what are your thoughts on what are the challenges that construction companies are going to be facing in the coming years?
I just think there's still an incredible amount of uncertainty, right? None of us like that answer after 2 years, but I have learned to admit that if I knew exactly where all of this was going to go, I probably wouldn't be doing this. I think that's the biggest thing is, leadership in the face of uncertainty is very difficult, right? So we're in this waiting pattern of seeing how some of these things play out, right? First winter after the war in Ukraine started, interest rates and how that continues to affect the economy. Will potentially a recession have an impact on the concept of return to work, et cetera, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty. I think from a business leadership perspective, this is about asking yourself, what are the upcoming scenarios, right? What do they likely look like? And what do I need to be set up to capitalize on them, right? So, and that ranges from everything to looking at your cash on hand and your capital structure and your ability to jump on deals, to making sure that your operating expenses are right-sized for a slowdown. And then understanding for the first time, really, I think a lot of us have not had to ask in a meaningful way, what is my downturn and diversification strategy? And I think everybody in a leadership perspective should be thinking about those things, considering them and planning accordingly, right? Fundamentally, I think it's about that.
Daren, I think it might be about the economy.
It's the economy, stupid. And guess what? It's going to get worse before it gets better. So for me, I'm focusing on paying down debt so that I'm super strong. If this thing takes a turn, of course, building the disaster plans, knowing exactly what you're going to do, because I've made all the mistakes, but one of the biggest ones I made was in that year 2016 when we knew that things were tough, and I was sitting in a CO meeting and I said, I'm not laying my people off because I love my people and I need my people. This isn't going to last that long, kind of like a pandemic. It's not going to last that long. And the next year, I lose $863,000 and I laid off 16 people, right? It's like, it was just delaying the inevitable. So for me, having that plan so that I can act super quick. When the pandemic hit, I mean, we never shut down, but we downsized really quick because our sales went away for a quarter. They became 50% of what they should have been. And so we reacted, and then we came back really strong, and so we made everybody whole again, and it was just like boom, boom. And that's the thing, just being prepared to act quick and, manage your debt. And I tell my guys that, when I talk to the field, I go, guys, this is what we're doing as a company, and this is what you should be doing as a family, is don't be taking on a bunch of debt, because we may have to weather a storm. A storm is coming. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And so be prepared for that. So that's what we're doing.
Have you seen any signs yet in 2022 yet?
The work's out there for us. It keeps coming in. Where we're struggling is managing the materials increases that have hit us, particularly in the fencing division, where metal went crazy and then you couldn't get the metal to build the fence. And so that's starting to taper off. Of course, fuel's killing us. I've got 160 trucks on the road, and fuel is just, it's killing us. So gross margins are taking a hit. But sales are strong and opportunities are strong out there. A lot of bigger opportunities than we're used to seeing are coming our way. Part of that's because we're super strong. We have a lot of talent to be able to build stuff and build it fast, and that's what Amazon wants, right? I don't care what it costs, get it built, because time is money. And so so far, so good.
I think they've talked to a lot of the economic issues which matter, but we have seen recessions before. We have seen high interest rates before. We've gone through this before. So I'll talk about the things that aren't in those categories, and only because it's after Election Day, is that people have even less trust in the government, and they have even less trust the government's going to fix things. So they're looking for someone else, and that someone else is your employer. So I would advise you to double down on your values, because they're looking to see what it is about you that you can help them. And I'm not talking about, we have everyone on the political spectrum. We've got about 600 or 700, hourly, and we have about another 500 or 600 salaried. And this isn't about trying to take a certain position, but it is that if you have a value to do something like better people's lives, then you need to show that. You need to show that you're doing something to actually advance it. Pandemic ended up hitting. We looked at the same thing, and one thing Daren brought up is like, heck, I want to keep everybody. And we're like, well, but we really don't have the cash flow coming in to do that. So, but we do have a lot of people who have a lot of vacation on the book. So why don't we do this thing? We're going to make a vacation pool. Everybody who wants to, you don't have to, but you can put into it. And then those who don't have, we don't have a place for them, we'll let them draw from that vacation pool. They can keep earning a salary, and that way you can show that you want to keep your people. So you're going to need to come up with creative things that are doing that are somehow showing what it is that you believe in and how you believe it, so that people know that they're in your company for a reason. They're there for the culture generally, but also for the career and the advancement. And it's the combination of those things that are going to keep them and keep them happy. And that's the people that will eventually, when the market comes back, help you do even better.
Yeah, I think there's one more thing I think I was just considering on the point of the people, from a leadership perspective, right? The leaders of organizations right now, call it your executive team, your L2s, those people have been faced. I think this is probably the most difficult thing. It's not how you manage any one of those situations independently, leadership right now for the past 2 to 3 years has been kind of faced with a barrage of crises, right? So I think it's really important as a CEO to focus on, what am I doing to make sure that my leadership team is able to keep sustaining and keep their ball on, or their eye on the strategic ball, right? What are the key things that we should be doing instead of getting pulled back into these ongoing crisis, right? This is the strategic goal. These are the things that we need to be working on. All of this is noise. We will get through it, right? And kind of dampering the effects of those things. And frankly, I think at the end of the day, you got to be able to have a really good sense of humor about some of this stuff, because if you can laugh about what, some of the things that have happened, it makes it all so much easier.
Well, I mean, for most of our companies, 75, 80% of people are out on the job site. They're having to go work on the job sites, and so they're there already. I think the way we reconcile is that that's kind of what they chose, whereas IT, well, they're actually doing better, not coming back, because they can focus more on the things that need to be focused on, and we get an extra hour or two because they're not commuting anymore, and that's actually a better thing. So but also to be part of the example, a little bit of what Jessica was saying, which is I realized that the leadership needed to go back in the office, and then everyone else would realize, gosh, if they're there, we kind of need to be there with them, or I have things to learn from them. Why wouldn't I want to go back? So part of it's the leadership and the example side, but then just being realistic. And I think that ultimately we'll never go back all the way. But I think the gift we were given from the pandemic is it's shown us we can be a whole lot more flexible. People can, maybe not come in Mondays, or even superintendents. We're working out ways where they just do the reports on Friday, and they stay at home, and trying to find ways to show that we want to help everybody has given people a sense that, yes, even though you have to be at the job site most of the time, there's still ways to be flexible. So how can you do that? How can you create that flexibility for people that feels fair?
Yeah, I think to Jess's point, that it's interesting if you start really digging in and asking individuals what it is they're after, right? I don't generally get the sense that most people want to work from home all the time, but there's something specific in a certain flexible situation that they're after, right? I need the ability to leave to pick up my child from school when they're sick. I need the ability to, because I don't have childcare in the morning, to come into work a little bit later, right? I think if you can pivot towards flexibility and demonstrate that your work is not your babysitter, right? That people have the flexibility and the autonomy to act like a grown-up, and that if they're getting their work done, they have the flexibility to manage their life too. I think it goes a long way, because I fundamentally think that what people really learned during the work from home period was, hey, I can manage my life and my job, right? And so let's trust them to continue to do that. And I think it goes a long way.
And I'll give my observations, since I actually, during COVID, I had the opportunity to see all these CEOs with different companies. And I think, first of all, we just gained a new tool. We have a new tool. We never, most of us, I hated video conferencing prior to COVID. And, and this gave us a tool. It actually did work. It allowed most every company to operate during it. So we learned a new tool. But it's almost like going from the 3 ice cream flavors of chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry to 31 or 50 flavors, 100 flavors. It gives, it actually confuses things when you have more choice, and it's more difficult. But I see companies, so there is no one right way. That's one thing I can definitively say. There is no one right way that works for every company. There are some that are remote only and work in thriving. And they were remote only, and it's an advantage, and they know how to communicate. There's others that are 100% in person, and they're working well. And then the hybrid things are, everybody's experimenting between whether it's hybrid on which days or which hours, or which teams or which not teams, or which projects, or why are we coming in. It used to be, well, what work could be done remotely? Now it's why should we be coming in the office? Is it important enough? And then everybody or just a few? So frankly, it's everybody's figuring it out, and that's one thing where we can, just having that conversation and learning what's working, not working, those kind of things like your question, which is just that comparison, when it's all relative of, well, why do I have to come in versus they don't have to, and those kind of things. It all depends on each company and job and situation. So we're figuring it out. So collectively, I think we'll be smarter, but it's a new tool. So
at 2 o'clock in the morning.
When it works for them.
yeah, and I found out early, even for our own organization, for 24 years, all of our meetings were in person behind closed doors because what we do is so confidential and so sensitive and so strategic. I never imagined we could do it virtually. But once every CEO in the world was forced to go on Zoom on the same friggin' day, all of a sudden we learned because we had to. And now geography doesn't matter as much. It matters, but time zones matter. But geography doesn't matter as much. I mean, you're seeing it. You're working with national organization. You're doing more virtual and phone calls than you are in person. But in person still matters. It's just how and when and why.
So for us, all of our job sites, they get hit up about schedule and cost, and yes, about safety and everything else. But if for us, it's a matter of one of our acronyms is around active caring. And if you really care, then you should be out there finding out why. And so we have set up where people are, as an executives, at least once a quarter, we go to a job site and we ask about nothing but safety. We go there, we go on tours, we talk about safety. One of the protocols is that we talk about it as a team, then we let go of the team, and we bring in all the subs, a representative from every sub, and we ask every sub, so how's it going? I mean, really, how's it going? And what are we doing? You work for a lot of other people. How are they doing it better than us? What could we do better as a team? And then we take that, and then we go on a job walk, we come on back, and then we sit with the team and say, hey, here's what we heard. How can we actually do some of these things? So just being center point for showing that safety matters truly above all else, and that you're out there in your daily actions doing that in some way is going to drive others to know that it must be important if it's getting the attention of a CEO.
So with that, in these uncertain times, what are the opportunities you guys see in the coming years, just in your industries and your businesses? So, anybody want to take that first?
Paul, you took all my answers. No, I'll take it. I think that I think for us, it's there's the great opportunity for talent acquisition, right? There's going to be the unfortunate fallout of people needing to right size their staff, right, and the opportunity to pick up other great players when those things unfortunately happen. And to your point, I think we are always actively looking for companies to partner with and to acquire, to expand into new locations. I think there's going to be a huge opportunity out there for that. I've seen that coming for a couple of years, and I'm surprised that it hasn't played out more strongly. But I think really in the face of a true recession, that is going to be a big upcoming opportunity. There are going to be a lot of companies that need capital infusions, that need a partner to kind of get to the next level and get through this. But ultimately, I'm optimistic, right? This is where, the tough times are where great companies and great organizations are made. And so I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned coming out of this. Excited for the future.
Jess?
I'm going to look a little farther down just because some of those things, you're right, are already out there. I think the opportunity that we have in the industry is one to think a little bit farther down, because COVID, yes, they gave us Zoom, but they also forced us to digitize a lot of what we're doing and how it's coming together and how we share stuff so we can get information. But we are incessantly data hoarders, and we need to move to being data sharing. And that's because we are so frickin' reliant on everyone else and what they do. Every job has about 50 subs, and those subs have their vendors, and then we've got the architect and designers, and they've got a dozen different engineers, and so there's got to be a better way of us being able to access much more quickly. Because, like I said, we just want decisions. We want decisions so that the architects, designers, and engineers can do their things. We can react to those, and so if we could get to a point to where the changes that were made or something someone was asking for, I could sit there and tell them in real time, well, you make those changes, it's going to cost you, 600,000, 20,000, 10 million, whatever it is. But I got to go away for a week and go ask people and go figure it out and bring it back to them and do it. It's like, and so it just takes longer and longer. So think about what you can do. And I'm not talking about giving up your most precious, intellectual property, but a lot of the stuff is common knowledge out there. But we have to find a way to be able to access it much quicker and then be able to serve it up much quicker so that we can get the decisions made and keep our projects going.
All right. And Daren,
I
it's
think-
your birthday tomorrow, so I'm going to have you bat cleanup.
Is that why the presents are there? No, I think for my company, the opportunity is definitely to improve the talent of our team, whether that be the Jack Welch method of getting rid of the bottom 10%, which unfortunately is the reality, or just finding really good talent to come in. And again, we're growing, we're learning new things, and finding the super performers that aren't. For us, it's about keeping our guys busy, right? And when we get slow, it becomes really, really hard. And so hopefully we're not as slow as other companies, and those people see us and they say, well, I can get more hours working for DRYCO than I can where I'm at. So that's really the opportunity for us, and it's worked in every, it's worked every time. So I expect it to continue.
All right. Well, I think we are at the end, and I would like to invite you to join me in thanking these three amazing leaders for just taking the time to come today and share with us. And it's been my great pleasure just to get to know them over the years. I learned from them, and I'm inspired by each and every one of them. So